Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper. And of course, 2025 has already given us some reminders as to why we need to be prepared. And that's why I made this video about prepping gear and concepts that you need in a heightened risk environment, which is currently the environment we are in and will likely remain that way for quite some time. So I wanted to share some concepts with you that you should be considering before you make plans or take any actions. And then I wanted to share some gear suggestions with you as well, including a couple that are more obscure that you might not have thought about. So make sure you wait around for that part of the video. But this is just to give you some ideas that might help you survive the current environment we're in. And of course, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. And thanks to them, I can have conversations like this with you, as well as giving you gear suggestions based on personal experience. And I also appreciate the fact that they support what I do, which means they support the prepared citizen concept in general. So a big thanks to Midway USA. Now, let's start with the concepts. What do you need conceptually to be considering before you do anything at this point in time, okay? The number one concept that you should be putting at your priority right now is avoidance. And when I say that, what I mean is unnecessary attendance of mass gatherings. If you don't need to be somewhere that would be considered a mass gathering event, maybe you don't need to be there. What does that mean? It's going to be your sports games, your concerts, or anywhere else publicly where a lot of people are in a concentrated area. We know for a fact that's where these people target the innocent. This is where they can inflict the most damage. And between the two recent attacks that just occurred here at the beginning of the year, the one you should be paying attention to is what happened in New Orleans, because this demonstrates that exact MO. So, you should be avoiding any mass gatherings. Now, of course, you might have to go to them based on your job or what your children's needs are or whatever it might be, right? There are things that I am aware of that could force your hand to force you to be in a situation where you're at a mass gathering. So that's when we're going to talk about some of these other concepts, because it can help you get through that in case there is an event. And some of the gear suggestions we're going to talk about later will also help out in that scenario. So of course, I know avoiding a mass gathering is probably the best thing you can do. But if you have to be there, there are some other things to consider. Now, before we jump into those concepts, I want to mention that this is not the time to be out and about drunk in public. This is not the time to be out and about just throwing all caution to the wind to have a good time. You should be taking this heightened risk environment seriously, especially if you consider yourself someone who is prepared. So avoiding those things and avoiding those types of activities is a good idea, because you might not even be somewhere that would be considered a mass gathering event. But if you're intoxicated, you're not going to be able to make good decisions if something happens. So keep all those things in mind. This doesn't necessarily have to last forever. This threat environment could recede eventually, and then we could find ourselves in a better situation a few months, maybe a year, maybe never again down the road, and you could go back out and enjoy yourself, right? But as for right now, my suggestion is to avoid those types of activities and mass gatherings. So if you have to go to a mass gathering, or you just find yourself in the middle of an event, where maybe you weren't at a mass gathering, but somebody chose that target location for a reason that you might not be aware of, but it's happening, right? What are some other concepts you can apply? Well, the first one's going to be awareness, right? You need to have heightened situational awareness, and you need to be very aware of your surroundings. You can't have your head down in your phone. You can't be distracted by every other thing that's going on. You need to be very aware. Now, there are some ways you can increase your awareness that I think are just good strategy moving forward based on if you find yourself at any of these places, okay? So if you do, for example, have to go to a sports game, maybe your kid is in high school basketball and you have to go to the game, but it's like a big deal, so there's a lot of people there and you're just a little bit worried about the security of the environment, right? Well, here's some things you might want to do regarding awareness, okay? First off, obviously, you need to know all your exits and all that stuff, but this is way beyond that, right? Like that's the stuff the movie theater literally tells you in the previews. Like you should just already be naturally doing that regardless of the situation. But we're in a heightened risk environment right now. This is not just, hey, I'm going to the movies, I better figure out where the fire exit is in case there's a fire, right? No, we're talking about in case there's an attack. That's a whole different situation, right? So yes, knowing that stuff is good, of course, but that should be just the baseline standard that you do no matter what, regardless of the environment. So what's beyond that? Okay, so one of the things that's beyond that would be to identify threats. And when I say that, I do mean people. Now, how do you identify threats and how do you actually do it in a way that's constructive rather than just profiling everybody based on whatever biases you might have? Well, first off, there are some things you could definitely be aware of and considering when you're looking at other human behavior. So, one way to do that is to find out if anyone else has the same level of awareness as you. What do I mean by that, right? And this is good for you to know because you might be identified as a threat to somebody else based on this exact piece of advice, but it is something that you should be working with, okay? If you're scanning a crowd and you're looking around, you have your head up and you're trying to figure out if there's anything out of the ordinary or out of place. So you're looking at people and things that aren't the main event, right? So if you're at a concert and you're not looking at the stage and you're not looking at your family, but you're looking at some random guy in the back corner, well, why are you doing that, right? Well, for you, it's because you're trying to identify whether or not that random guy is a threat. But if someone else sees you doing that, you might look like a threat. So that's what you're looking for. You want to look for people who are looking around and trying to basically pay attention to anything other than what they should be paying attention to. And that gives you at least something to consider. It doesn't mean that they are a threat. It means that that person is trying to figure something out that's beyond what they should be there for, right? Now, another way to kind of pay attention to other people that could be threats in these environments would be to pay attention to anyone involving themselves with dead space. And what do I mean by that? Dead space is basically they are somewhere they don't need to be or shouldn't be, and they aren't going with the flow of the current situation. So for example, you're at a sports game and you're at the concession stand. People are in line at the concession stand to get snacks and to get drinks and to get back to the bleachers, right? Well, if someone else is in line there and they are then suddenly deciding to leave the line and then they go somewhere that doesn't make sense, like a janitor's closet, right? But they're clearly not the janitor. Well, that's something that you would want to pay attention to because why is this person suddenly paying attention to an area that has nothing to do with them? Or if somebody is searching a trash can, right? That's an interesting behavior. That, like I said, it doesn't mean they're a threat, but it would tell me that that person has something going on other than what it is they should be paying attention to. So those are the types of activities that also give you a red flag and that you can just remember or put into your data bank of possible or perceived threats. And that way, if things start to happen, you can identify those people more easily or more quickly or keep an eye on them in general in case there's any level of escalation, right? So you understand what I'm trying to say? Like out of behavior activity and things that just don't make sense for where you are or what type of environment you're in are things you should be paying attention to. And honestly, you're probably going to look like one of those people while you're trying to do this type of surveillance. But that's okay because you know you're not the threat. But that doesn't mean somebody else might not put you in their target deck, right? But it will mean that, there's a reason for why you're doing it. So that is something you can do to identify threats. And one more thing that I want to bring up is that if somebody makes you uncomfortable, if somebody is just outwardly expressing a level of creepiness or a level of hostility, maybe that's a good sign to just dip out. And this is something you need to mentally prepare yourself for now. If an environment becomes hostile or has a level of hostility to it that makes you uncomfortable, you have to be willing to just leave. It doesn't matter how much your tickets cost to the concert. It doesn't matter how upset your family's going to be. It doesn't matter if your kids are sad because you're leaving the movie theater or whatever it is, right? If you feel uncomfortable and things get weird, and especially related to a person giving off a vibe, just leave. Listen to your instincts and don't take a risk just because you spent a little bit of money or you had a drive, right? Like just call it a day, play it safe, and get out of there, okay? And honestly, I think we all know this for a fact. I know it for a fact personally. My wife, and generally women, tend to be able to identify creepiness a lot faster than men. Why? Well, first off, I'm not that concerned about people being creepy because generally I'm just walking around minding my own business. Nobody approaches me, nobody gives me a weird look, and nobody is going to create a level of threat for me related to being creepy that's going to cause me any real concern. But women deal with it every single day of their lives, right? So they're used to people being creepy and they understand as soon as somebody puts themselves out there as being a creep, that's exactly what's happening. So they might have more intuition about it than you do. And so if your wife or sister or, even regardless if it's just a friend or whatever, if they're telling you somebody's being creepy or acting weird, you should definitely pay attention to it because they have to filter through that all the time compared to you, the guys. And that's just the truth. And I'm sorry, but we're that problem that created that, okay? So moving on from there. You also need to identify a couple of strategic locations or concepts within the current environment you're in. Okay. And so what I mean by that is whatever location or whatever area you're at, you need to identify these places so that way you know exactly where to go if things start to happen. So the first thing is going to be called an LCC, which is last closest, right? So last cover concealment. Last just means closest. What was the last piece of cover or concealment that you were at before you're in your new location? Now, from a civilian standpoint, the way this should work is that if you're walking through, let's just say like metal detectors and you're getting towards your seats and you're at a stadium, okay? Well, where's the last place that you could take cover and it actually provide you with cover? And past that, where's the last place that would be concealment, not necessarily cover, but you could hide in? And so take mental notes of those different places so you know where you could retreat to if need be, because that's going to give you at least some level of protection that you won't have out in the open, especially at a mass gathering event, okay? Now, another thing you need to identify is what would be called an Alamo. Now, an Alamo means you have a 360-degree defensible position, okay? What does that mean? It means that you put yourself in a situation where you can't get flanked or snuck up on, and if somebody's coming to get you, they have to come through a predetermined path in order to get there, which means you have a better chance of either defending yourself or retreating or escaping based on what's happening, right? So find a place that you could actually protect yourself in and give yourself some defensible positions in the meantime, right? And so that's something else you need to identify, whether or not that's behind a concession stand, whether or not that's in a particular room that you saw, or like a locker room or something like that you're nearby, whatever it may be, know where that is, okay? And then you want to identify what's called a TCC, Tactical Covered Command. Now, these terms are not really for us civilians, right? But I'm using them as examples for what we could still use in the sense of strategy during these different types of attack scenarios. So what's a TCC? It's an emergency spot that you can direct a team from. Basically, it's a safe area where you have the time to regroup and talk about a plan and develop a plan and then leave that area with a plan rather than just panically running through whatever venue you're at, right? So think about that. Where could you go? Which is generally going to be the same as like the Alamo, right? Where you get in there, you know you're somewhat safe for the time being, and then you can regroup, talk about where you're heading next, or what to do if somebody comes in, or what to do if you're heading somewhere new and you run into an attacker or whatever it might be. And that way you leave with at least some level of strategy and planning, and your group, whoever you're with, has an idea of what's about to happen, okay? And we see this in movies a lot, right? Where people get separated or whatever's happening, there's like a big explosion or something bad's going on and people end up in this little room or like a kitchen or something, and then they get together and say, okay, you know, there's a way out of here, but it's through the back door, and you know, if we go quickly, they might not see us, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about. I only use that example so you can maybe apply it to some of the media that you've consumed in the past that would give you an idea about what this concept really means. So those are all of the considerations I would make based on these concepts, okay? The avoidance is the biggest one, but I get it. You can't always avoid going somewhere. You can't. And you can't always just stay home for the rest of your life, right? So we have to make good decisions, but we also know we still have to live life. I understand that. But right now, things are more dangerous. And everyone's been telling us that for a long time. So please take it seriously and just don't go places, especially if you're going to go out and get drunk in public and everything else. Like, just don't do that right now. Buy some time. Take it easy and understand that things will likely improve at some point, but right now is not the time, okay? And if you can't avoid these mass gatherings, because you just have to be there for work or whatever it might be, right? The awareness stuff is very, very important. All the concepts and strategies I just shared with you will be applicable and are something that could get you out of there alive if need be, okay? Now, let's talk about gear considerations, because this is something I know a lot of people enjoy discussing, but also something that I just want to bring a couple of new ideas to the table to try to remind you of what you should be doing strategically before you walk out the door at this point in time, especially knowing you're going to a mass gathering or something like that, right? Or even just a large public space, whatever it may be. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to suggest you have, and I have most of this stuff in this backpack right here, and then we're going to talk about why you might have to switch things around or do things differently depending on situation, but for right now, it's all here in this backpack because I can just throw this on and feel pretty good about it, okay? So the first piece of gear that you need to have on you, right, and this is going to sound really basic, but a lot of people haven't thought about it, is an easy identifier. What that means is that this is something you can put on and easily identify yourself with in case there's an event. And if you get on the phone and you're on the phone with 911, right, and you're talking to a dispatcher, you let them know, hey, I'm in this event right now. Here's what's happening. I'm the guy in a bright orange beanie. So any responding officers that show up, please let them know that I am just trying my best to defend myself and my family or whatever it may be. And that I'll be the guy in the bright orange beanie, right? You don't want to have to wear this all the time, obviously, but you also want it to be something that's identifiable enough and something that's more unique that not everybody's going to be wearing wherever you are at the time, okay? And so if you go to a baseball game and you're wearing a Yankees hat and you say, hey, I'm the guy in the Yankees hat and it's a Yankees game, that's not going to really help you. So you need to have an orange or like crazy colored or something unique hat. And I'm choosing a beanie because it folds up nice. I can put it in my backpack and it's very identifiable. Now, this might help in case you are in a situation where you have to engage attackers. If I have to draw my concealed carry and engage an attacker because they don't give me a choice, right? I'm trying to escape and evade and it just doesn't work out. I need the police to be aware of the fact that I'm wearing this hat. Now, maybe I don't have time to make that phone call and maybe this doesn't matter and maybe you just don't end up using it at all. And that's fine too. But I think having it on you would be a good idea for that particular scenario. Because in many times when people call 911, and they're on the phone and they're talking about what's happening, they'll be asked, what are they wearing or what do they look like? So that way the police know who you are so they can identify you as either not being a threat or just be aware of where you are and what you look like, okay? So that's something that I would definitely suggest. Now, let's be aware, because of the way radios work and the way that tense situations work, this could also put you on the radar in the wrong way. What I mean by that is that dispatch gets a call. Hey, guy in the orange beanie is a good guy. He's on your side. Got it. Calls the police on the radio. Hey, guys who are in the middle of something traumatic and extremely dangerous right now, there's a guy in an orange beanie that says he's on your side, right? All the cop hears is there's a guy in an orange beanie. What does that mean now, right? And now I'm looking for the guy in the orange beanie, but I'm not sure why, but I'm worried about it because I was just told there's a guy in an orange beanie. So be aware of that too. I mean, it doesn't necessarily save you and it doesn't necessarily remove the risk of being targeted by the police if you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it does at least give them something to work with, which is better than nothing, right? So have an easy identifier on you that's easy to put on, that you don't have to wear, but that you can at least express to somebody else that that's you wearing the identifier, okay? Now, the next thing isn't in the backpack because you wouldn't have it in a backpack, but this is a big deal. And this is something that you need to take responsibility for, and you need to really think about this. Please, please. As somebody who grew up in Florida, I can tell you that there's a large majority of people out here who don't ever take this advice, but you definitely need to take this advice right now in a heightened threat environment. There's no excuse to not wear lace-up shoes. If you're wearing sandals right now, and you're going to a mass gathering event, knowing what the heightened threat level is, you're I guess a liability, or you just don't care about your own safety, or you're not worried about your chances when it comes to escape and evasion. I'm not sure. But there's no excuse unless you're on a beach to be wearing anything other than some lace-up shoes that can help you get through an emergency much easier and, I don't know, defend yourself if need be, jump onto something that's broken. I mean, who knows what you might run into in those types of events. But wearing flip-flops is not going to help you at all. So please do yourself and everyone else a favor and just wear some real f***ing shoes when you're out and about right now based on the current events, okay? I don't know what else to say. Yeah, you're just going to the local convenience store to grab a dip and then head home. Wear your sandals, I don't care. But if you're heading to a mass gathering event, please think about wearing some real shoes. You might need to run for your life. Do you want to run for your life in sandals? Probably not. So, just saying, I know some of you are wearing sandals right now. Please consider that, okay? Now, what else do you need? Well, this is going to be more obvious, but it's important, okay? So, first off, you should be carrying around substantial first aid. This is a bare fact from Refuge Medical. They're excellent. I got links down below with discount codes, and all the profits go to a charity that helps victims of trafficking. So just so you're aware, I don't make profits off of the links that I use for them. I just donate all those profits directly to their charity, and I think it's actually a good cause. But regardless, whether or not you get Refuge Medical or anything else, please just make sure you have a fully capable first aid kit. I have some minimalist kits that I carry around as well, depending on where I'm at or where I'm going. But if I'm going somewhere that's going to be a mass gathering that's more of a likely target for some type of an attack, then having the full blowout kit with everything you might need is more important to me and becomes more of a priority. So make sure you have medical, but even more important, make sure you get training so you know how to use the stuff that's in the kit. Because without that training, you're definitely not going to be as effective as you would hope. Okay, so that's pretty obvious, but I think very important. Okay, now another one that's really good, at least in my opinion, is going to be some slick armor. Now, when I say slick, especially for those of you who don't hang out on GunTube a lot or whatever you want to call it at this point, slick just means there's no magazine carriers, there's nothing strapped to it, there's no pouches or anything already put on it. It's just the plate carrier and the armor. Now, what's nice about this is, of course, you can leave this in your vehicle if you don't have another way to carry it around, but you can also wear it under some heavy clothes and people might not notice, or you can slim this down even further depending on what plates you're using. So these are some lightweight plates that are actually rated for rifles, including M855 green tip ammo and stuff like that, but it's kind of thick. So if I wanted to wear it concealed, that could be difficult. But what I can do is actually fit it in this backpack, depending on what else is in the backpack. But right now I can't fit it. You'll find out why here soon. But you could technically carry this in your backpack and then deploy it if you find yourself in a bad situation. And at least at that point in time, you have some level of armor to make yourself somewhat bulletproof, right? Now, there are other armor options that are more slim and concealable that you could easily wear under just like a flannel or even a button-up shirt. But unfortunately, most of those types of armor only stop pistol rounds. And what we've seen with some of these recent attacks, and actually attacks throughout history, is that the people who want to do the damage, they bring a rifle. They generally don't use handguns. And so rifle rounds aren't going to be stopped by your Kevlar or your level 3A, slim fit plates or anything like that. And that's unfortunate because that stuff's very concealable, but it's not necessarily going to stop what these attackers are using in the sense of rifle rounds. So to stop rifle rounds, you need real plates, which is what these are. These are RF3 rated plates. The only thing they won't stop is armor penetrating 30-06 and things that are more powerful than that. But in general, most of your threats you're going to run into are going to be stopped by this. Very difficult to wear under anything other than like a heavy jacket while still being concealed, but easy to put in a backpack and carry around with you. Yeah, extra weight. It's going to be heavy, I know, but it does give you that option in case you need it. Not to mention you could pass it off to a loved one, your wife or your child or whatever it may be in order to make them a little bit more protected, or you can leave it in the backpack and the backpack suddenly becomes a shield of sorts. So there's a lot of ways you could approach this, but this is something I would suggest minimum having in your vehicle, but you can carry it in your backpack and you could technically conceal it depending on clothing and everything else. Just something I want to throw out there. Slick, because you don't want it to have any additional space or volume that it takes up than what it needs. And what it needs to be able to do is stop bullets, not be a full deployment load. And here's one thing I want to throw out there really quick before we move on. This isn't about a loadout. This isn't about, LARPing and being a soldier or anything like that. We're not carrying a chest rig with 21 magazines in it just to, deal with a threat. Your whole goal here is to protect you, your family, and escape and evade whatever the situation is. It's not to become Rambo, right? So I'm not loading this out with magazines and all kinds of stuff. That's not the goal here, and that's not what I'm trying to get myself into. My goal is to get out safely, right? And that's just what your goal should be as well. And that means I'm not carrying a fully loaded out plate carrier for the purposes of, getting into a firefight, right? Like that's not the goal, okay? So I just wanted to mention that. Now, what else should you be considering gear-wise based on this current threat level? I think it's always a good idea to have a less lethal option, okay? So now this is actually bear spray. Now I don't carry like pepper spray in my pocket or something like that, but if I have this bear spray in my backpack, it gives me another option. Is this an option that's going to make a huge difference during a large-scale attack of some sort? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But are there situations where you can use less lethal force to get you out of a situation that lethal force might otherwise put you in a different situation, aka the full force of the law, right? Yes. And so there are situations right now, even with these attacks, where having this option is just worth the very minimal weight that it takes up. Because if I can go ahead and stop something from happening before it reaches the point where lethal force becomes legal, well, first off, we did it. We stopped the threat, right? And we got away or whatever it may be. But second off, now I'm not going to jail because I shot somebody before they ever posed an actual threat, right? And we don't want to have to wait till somebody poses a threat to that level to where you actually are legally justified in shooting them, because that means they're already attacking at that point in time. And this might just be enough to help you get away from something before it becomes a real event. So that's just a consideration. Do I think that this is likely to be employed, especially in some of these larger scale attacks on mass gatherings? Not very likely. But is it something that could be useful? Yes, and it's not something that takes up a lot of space or requires any extra weight penalty, right? So that's something else that I would definitely be considering right now. And of course, you can buy things that are more reasonable, right? So handheld pepper spray or pepper spray on a keychain or whatever it is, right? Pepper spray is pretty effective. It's used by police and by security and everyone else because it actually works. But bear spray is really strong and it has a really long stream on it. And so, maybe that's something to consider. So, moving on. What else would you want to have on you? Well, we have the less lethal option. So, clearly, you need to have some lethal options too. Now, I am a concealed carrier. In North Dakota, we have constitutional carry. So anyone who lives here as a resident with a state ID can legally carry, as long as they can legally own a firearm. But at the same time, I also have a level or a class 1 concealed carry permit, which allows me to carry in 36 other states as well. So that is something that I find important that I practice every single day in the sense of concealed carry. So you should have a concealed carry of some kind. Now, mine's currently unloaded, not because I don't carry one in the chamber, but because I'm only wearing it to make this video right now at my house. I suggest carrying one with one in the chamber, but that's going to be up to you based on your comfort level. If you're not comfortable with that, you should probably get more training, in all honesty, okay? And I don't want to hear anyone say anything about Israeli special forces ever again. Now, this is just a pistol. This is an HK USP in 9mm. I'm carrying this currently. Usually I carry a Glock, as you guys know from this channel. However, this gun allows me to use heavy winter gloves, and it's currently negative 15 degrees outside. So I have been messing around with the HK USP to find out if it's something that I maybe want to practice with more, because it allows me to use this gun while also wearing the accessories and equipment that I generally use on a daily basis based on where I live. So having a concealed carry is a great idea for obvious reasons. Now, maybe you don't carry or maybe you can't carry. That's a different story. But if you can, I highly suggest it at this point in time if where you're going allows it. Clearly, if you're going to a basketball game, you're probably not going to be able to carry a gun there. But if you can carry a gun where you're going, I probably would, as long as you can do it legally. Now, if you can carry a gun where you're going, you also may want to consider a larger gun just in case. Now, this is a concept that I'm exploring further regarding PDWs or PCCs and bag guns in general. But if you needed a larger gun and you wanted it to fit into a standard size backpack, but you needed a little bit more capability because the guys who are attacking you have rifles, right? We're talking about guys with AKs or AR-15s or things of that nature. Well, a handgun is definitely much less effective in that scenario because they're much harder to shoot and they just don't offer the same ballistics and everything else, right? So if you can do something a little bit larger, I would suggest at least having that capability. Now, some people might carry something in their vehicle when it comes to a larger platform. And this platform right here fits directly in my backpack. So this is a Beretta PMXS. This is a 9mm PCC, okay, which maybe a little big for the term PDW, but I'm 6'3" and 205 pounds, so maybe it works for me as a PDW. Regardless, it's not an AR-15. It doesn't have rifle ballistics. It doesn't have the capabilities that a rifle could provide you with, but it fits in a backpack that is smaller than what a rifle can fit in, regardless of barrel length. A lot of times the rifles need a certain amount of barrel length to actually be effective, and at that point in time, they just don't fit in that backpack. Even with folding stocks, ask me how I know. But what I will say is that this gives me a lot more capability because I have more points of contact, which allow me to handle the recoil and get on target faster, while also giving me a lightweight magazine that capacity that allows me to carry them more easily because of how thin they are and everything else, okay? So this is an additional measure. Is it necessary? Maybe, maybe not. Would it make you a target if you were to deploy something like this during an attack? Maybe, maybe not. Did you tell them about your identifier, bright orange hat? Did you tell them that you have a PDW style weapon that you're using to defend yourself? Did you give out information when you could? Or did you hand your phone to your wife or whoever you're with, your coworker, and say, hey, tell 911, I've got this hat on, I've got this gun, and that we're just trying to stay safe and we're trying to defend ourselves and get out of here, right? Who knows, right? There are a lot of variables that would dictate whether or not you could deploy such a weapon system during an attack like that. Just the way it is, we can't guarantee what's going to happen. But having the option could be very beneficial. And if somebody came at you with an AK or an AR-15, this is going to give me a lot more capability, even though it's still shooting 9mm, than a handgun, because I'll actually be able to get rounds on target more easily with follow-up shots. Whereas a handgun is going to be more difficult and is just going to be less effective ballistically. Okay? So this gives me options. It is something to consider. And sure, by the way, it is safe, okay? So, this is my gear suggestions. And the reason why, I guess these are my gear suggestions. I don't know English anymore. The reason why it's pretty minimalist and simplistic is because this is just what might help you in those situations, but some of it might not be worth anything. And all you really need to try to do is get away as fast as possible. You're trying to escape and evade. That's your goal, right? And protect the lives of your family or your friends or coworkers or anyone else you're with in the meantime. So you don't need a full-blown military loadout. You don't need a drone, right? Like there's not a lot of stuff you need. We don't even need, water and food. Like that's not what this is. This is just to have additional capabilities on hand in case there's an attack based on the fact that we are in a heightened threat environment and you are going somewhere that you know could be targeted by the types of people who want to do the most damage they can here in the United States. That's it. That's exactly what the point of all this is. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Anything you would add to this kit, right? Like I said, this is not to be a go bag. This is not to survive in the woods overnight. This is to get you out of an attack alive. That's it, right? You don't need a compass. You don't need radios. You need to just go. But some of these things might be the difference of being alive versus not being alive, right? And at the same time, this also might allow you to help others who need assistance once the attack is over, especially regarding the first aid. And the orange hat might actually tell first responders that there's at least somebody there who's on their side. And let's not forget your shoes. And in case you're asking, these are Victos Taculus shoes, okay? So they're like a hybrid, like basketball shoe boot, right? Just wear some shoes. Like seriously, it shouldn't be that hard. But this could make the difference as well, okay? Just think of Die Hard. Anytime you're about to go out and you're putting on sandals, do you really want to step all over glass, right? So I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I'm just doing my best to give people good information and try to help them when it comes to their own preparedness and this current situation we're all dealing with. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.